Hi everyone, Aaron here for zollotech, and this is your news update for December 21st, 2020. And since I'm doing these every week, I thought I'd just put the date in there to kind of keep it consistent throughout. Now, the first thing comes from Counterpoint Research, which said that the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro models are the world's best-selling 5G smartphones, which doesn't really surprise me. iPhones will sell a lot from the time they release up until whenever the next one comes out. So the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro are the perfect size, I think, for most people, and it doesn't surprise me that they seem to be the best seller. Now, Apple does not release these numbers, but according to Counterpoint Research, the 12 and 12 Pro are the world's best-selling 5G smartphones, followed by the Note 20 Ultra. So that's the next one in line, which is kind of interesting because it looks like Samsung may not release a Note 20 this coming year. But either way, it's nice to see that Apple is doing well with the phones, and I'm sure we'll see more about that later. Hopefully Apple will update them as well, or update us on them as well. The Mini apparently is the least selling, and then the 12 Pro Max is somewhere in between. Now, as far as the iPhone 13, well, I've shown you this before. This is not an iPhone at all. It's actually a clone, but if the iPhone 13 looks anything like this, at least it'll be squared off. But according to analyst Ross Young, the iPhone 13 is said to feature an LTPO 120Hz OLED display. Now, he was correct about them not including the 120Hz display this year, and has said that they'll include it next year. And I would expect them to do that, given that everyone else has kind of done that. They've done ProMotion on the iPad Pro for a few years now, since 2017, and I think it's time to bring it to the iPhones, as long as the supply chain is there to do so, and with an LTPO display, they could do that. So I think they'll have that in this upcoming option with a ProMotion display, at least on the Pro and Pro Max phones, I would think, and then maybe the other phones later on. Now, also, Apple is apparently working on its own modem to replace the Qualcomm modems. Now, in the past, we had Qualcomm, then we had Intel from about the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 11 series, and then we're back to Qualcomm after Apple settled a dispute between Qualcomm and themselves with some different patents and things. So apparently they're licensing technology that will allow them to create their own chips. And I'm pretty anxious to see what they've got, because they could create very low power chips. They've done this with their A series processors. The A14 Bionic, for example, is super power efficient and super fast compared to the competition. And if they can do the same thing for their Wi-Fi or cellular modems, I would love to see them do that. So that sort of thing, whether or not they're doing Wi-Fi, I don't know, but it appears to be that they're going to work on cellular modems for 5G, which could really help with power and signal over time. So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see what Apple has, and hopefully we'll have that maybe as soon as next year, but there is no time frame given for that. Now, according to an Apple patent found by Patently Apple, apparently the next Apple Watch could have Touch ID on it. Now, there's some interesting drawings from that patent that show basically the button here on the side could be used as a fingerprint sensor. It looks very similar to what we have on the iPad Air with a fingerprint sensor. If they included that into the Apple Watch, I think it makes sense for verifying transactions instead of just double clicking, better biometric security, and things like that. Then also, Apple Insider found a separate patent that hints to Apple working on under-display cameras for the Apple Watch. So maybe we could take FaceTime calls. You wouldn't see the camera. We've seen some other smartphones with this, and you wouldn't see the camera until you needed it, and then you'd be able to see the camera. I would hope they'd bring that to the iPhone as well, get rid of the notch. Maybe they can hide everything using that same technology, and then only see maybe Face ID when you need to, and then it goes away. Something like that would be really interesting. I know a lot of people would welcome it, and it would be amazing to make FaceTime calls from your Apple Watch and have people see you and you see them. So that's sort of a dream many people have had since kids with comic books and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. I would love to see that. Now, a lot of people want to know when to expect iOS 14.4 Developer Beta 2 and Public Beta 2, and when we can expect iOS 14.4 releasing to the public. And so I wanted to talk about what we can gain from last year and what Apple did, although this year's been very different and everything could change. But based on what Apple did last year around the holiday time, Apple released iOS 13.3 to the public, and then didn't release anything publicly until much later with iOS 13.3.1 on January 28th. We didn't really see any public releases until that point. At the same time, they had iOS 13.4 betas, and beta 2 did not come out until February 19th. And so we may have a very long time until we see a release of 14.4. They actually released it in March, where they had a final release date of March 24th when they released 13.4. So we may not see 14.4 for a few months. There were 4 betas and then a release in between. So we definitely could see 14.3.1 or something along those lines, maybe even a 14.3.2. But Apple has so changed this from year to year that it's hard to say. However, right now they are on sort of a vacation schedule based off what they've done every year anyway, and I really wouldn't expect anything until minimum the week of January 4th or January 3rd. So while they definitely could release something else, it's unlikely until that point. I've been wrong in the past, but based off what they've done in the past few years, that seems likely. Now, other than that release, Apple also had quite a bit of information going out back and forth with Facebook as far as privacy. Apple introduced some serious privacy with iOS 14, and they were really going to lock this down and make it difficult for advertisers to track what's going on your phone. Facebook and some others fought back, and Apple postponed that until January. Now it's about to kick in, and well, as you can imagine, Facebook and others are not happy. Either way, Apple's going to turn that feature on, making our phones more and more secure, and I'm personally looking forward to that. So I know a lot of people value their privacy, of course, and so to see that lock down our phone even more, I value that and can't wait for them to do that, but there is a lot of noise about that. Now, Apple quietly updated Maps in the background, so those of you that use Apple Maps and use Look Around, which is sort of like Street View on Google Maps, they've updated it for additional cities. So, for example, Denver, Colorado is one of them. There's also Detroit, Michigan, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So if we go into Denver, for example, maybe go to this street, go down here, and let's continue to zoom in. Maybe we'll go here, and we'll hit the little look around button, and you can look around. So you have that ability now to just sort of look around the street view and see what's going on, and then drive smoothly down the street. And that's something you get a little bit better on Apple Maps than you do on Google Maps. It's nice and smooth, and of course it has very high resolution images. So that's been added for the cities I mentioned. Now, Apple TV has been a long time coming, and it's been something that's been rumored to come out this past year, and it never did. However, it seems very likely that we're going to see a new version very soon. The 4K version has been out for a long time, and while it still works, it could use for a processor upgrade as well as spatial audio. Apple released the AirPods Max, and spatial audio is fairly incredible. If you haven't experienced it, you can use it with AirPods Pro as well, and it sort of makes it seem like when you're using them that the sound is coming from your device, and it sort of has a surround sound feel to it. And it's something that I think is great, and I've been using my iPad to watch movies with using them, but you can't use it on Apple TV. And so I would definitely think Apple's planning to release an Apple TV that allows you to use that feature, that would have maybe some different location, maybe the U1 chip in it to let it know where it is, as opposed to where the AirPods are, to give you that spatial audio experience. I look forward to that. I really hope we see something like that soon, and to have all of the benefits of a new Apple TV with maybe a new A12 or newer processor in it would be great. It's kind of slow at this point, and I would love to see it upgraded to be much faster. So I'll look for those fairly soon. Also, apparently, AirPods Pro Lite are still coming in 2021. So we had the AirPods Max like we have here, but AirPods Pro or AirPods Lite with basically the same sort of AirPods Pro look, removable tips that you can change based on the size of your ear canal, as well as a smaller stem, and then also maybe all of the features of AirPods Pro, but with better battery life and no noise cancellation or transparency. So those things apparently will be coming soon, along with, I would think, a whole line of other Apple audio products. It seems like they're really ramping these up. We have the AirPods Max. Will we get AirPods Pro Max? That's just a guess on my part, but it makes sense that they keep pushing out audio products, so it would be interesting to see what they have. Hopefully not too much more expensive, though, since this is fairly expensive for headphones, or very expensive for most headphones. Now, a couple other small things is if you're using an M1 Mac, one of the Mac Minis, MacBook Pro, or the MacBook Air, and you use Zoom, today it gained native support for M1 Max, and then also Microsoft Office the other day gained native M1 Max support. So things are really catching up as far as the software, and it should be super fast if you're using that. Now, over the last few years, many people have said that Apple is working on an Apple Car. Now, many people suspect that this just may be related to technology, such as software like iOS that they would provide to automakers for their cars. But a recent rumor says that they're actually sourcing parts from Taiwan to build their own car to release or at least debut in late 2021. Now, whether or not this is true is really hard to say, and I've long suspected that they probably won't make a physical car, but rather maybe software for those cars, or provide maybe better software for different manufacturers such as Ford, GM, or others to compete with other manufacturers. While we don't really have any more details than that, it seems fairly unlikely that we'll see a car this year, but it's possible. And at this point, I think anything's possible. So we'll have to wait and see, but let me know if you think Apple's actually going to release a car in the comments below. And so that's it for this week's news. If there's anything new, of course, I'll keep you updated on that. And let me know what you would like to see most in 2021. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.